The goal of this video is to prepare you to write a persuasive essay on the CCP educational system. The goal of a persuasive essay is to convince the reader of your point of view. So oftentimes your audience may have a different point of view than you do. In 099, we've looked at some examples of this kind of essay, and now you're going to write your own. So we're going to talk a little bit about the structure of a persuasive essay. It is similar to other essays you've written. It's similar to the analytical essay, just one part is different, which we'll talk about in a minute. The structure that we'll be laying out for you here gives you a starting point. It's a way to organize, it's a template, it's a formula. And then from there, you can grow your essay with examples and development. But this will give you sort of the foundation so that your essay is strong and organized. In terms of your audience for this essay, your professor is your audience, but your audience may be wider than that. In the past, essays like this have been shared with CCP administration or the CCP college as a whole. To actually create some changes at the college. So keep that in mind and write toward a larger audience with this particular essay, particularly to people who may not agree with you. And that gets us into our first step in the persuasive essay, which is the introduction. Now you'll notice this is the place that's different than the analytical essay. So there's two parts, C and T, contradiction and thesis statement. So you're going to begin with a contradiction. And what that means is you're going to state what the opposite side would think and why. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to talk about, the opposite of what you're trying to do? The reason is that you want to show that you've thought about other people's perspectives before going into your own argument. It's often helpful when you're trying to convince someone of something to connect with them and let them know you understand where they're coming from before you state what you think they should do or they should think or they should feel. For an example, let's say you want to go for a walk and you want your roommate to go on a walk with you, but your roommate has to study. So in order to get your roommate to go on a walk with you, you don't just barge into the room and say, hey, come on, let's go on a walk. Leave your studying. It's fine. Let's just go walk. Come on. I want to go on a walk. Come with me. These are the reasons why. Come. You want to first acknowledge. You want to say, hi, roommate. I'm sure your roommate has a name other than roommate, but for now it's roommate. Hi, roommate. Oh man, I know you have a big test tomorrow, and I know you've been studying really hard. And this is a really stressful time for you. But it might be really helpful to just get out in nature a little bit and walk and clear our heads, and we could just talk and breathe and relax, and then you can come back and study some more. Sort of acknowledging where that other person is coming from can help you to build your argument and help them to listen better. I don't know if you've ever picked up something to read or you were listening to something and the person just said something that shut you down. I feel like all of you have had this experience. Someone says something and you just immediately shut down because they think the opposite of you and they are not even trying to understand where you're coming from or your own experience, right? You shut down. So we don't want our audience to shut down. We want our audience to open up to this other perspective. So we do that by creating a common ground and establishing some sort of understanding. So an example would be, if we're going to criticize some things about CCP, we could start by saying something like, Community College of Philadelphia, CCP, if you're going to call it CCP later, you can put that here, is a great place to learn. Tuition is low, class sizes are small, and students get a lot of attention from professors. Now, here's where we hit them. However is a really important word in this paper, especially in your introduction, because it shows that despite this, there's an issue. There's something else besides that, and that's what shows that we're shifting gears. So we want to see a transitional word just like this in your essay. However is a great one, and you have permission to use that in your thesis statement. It's a great signal that we're shifting gears. Okay, so yay, CCP is great. Okay. However, CCP should have better parking. I know you hear me on that one. Clearer communication with new students, and more support for developmental education. This is our thesis. So it says that CCP should be better, and here are 3 examples of how it can be better. All right, so then when we go to our second paragraph, we're going to start with something that should look familiar to you, a topic sentence followed by an example and then a link to the thesis. So for instance, for our first one, the first thing we listed in the thesis was better parking. So we have a topic sentence. Improving parking would make CCP a better place to learn. From there, we're going to give some examples. Maybe you tell a story about how you were late to class because you couldn't find parking in the neighborhood. Or maybe you tell a story about how you had to take public transportation because the parking is too expensive near CCP, or that you couldn't find it fast enough, so you have to take the bus, and then the bus made you late, or whatever. Any kind of story you can tell would be helpful. You can also use a quotation sandwich for your example anywhere in this paper. If you want to talk about what someone else said or another person's experience, you can quote them in your paper as well. After you give the example, then you link it back to your thesis so that people aren't losing your point. Now, sometimes students feel like this is overdoing it, it's overwriting it. But it's easy for people's attention to go away, especially as you get into the examples. They say, oh, I had that experience, that happened to me, I've been there, I've done that, and their brain goes in another direction. And we say, hey, come back here. We're talking about how to make CCP a better place to learn, and we're linking it back to the thesis again so that the reader stays focused on your argument and what you're trying to persuade them. The next 2 paragraphs will be the same. So you'll mention your second example. The second example was clearer communication with new students. You'll provide some stories, some details, some quotations to kind of support that point, and then link it back to your thesis. And the last body paragraph, you'll mention more support for developmental education, an example, a link back to your thesis. So those paragraphs have a very clear pattern that replicate. Where it becomes individualized and it becomes your paper is how you develop it, and the types of examples that you use, and the way that you emphasize and focus on your point. Lastly, your concluding paragraph should look very similar to what you've done before. The REST acronym. Restate your thesis in a new way. Think of it as having written this whole paper, how can you restate what your main point is from the very beginning? Emphasize any examples that stand out to you as important, that people want to remember. I always say to students that when I put down your paper and I go to wash my dishes, I want to still be thinking about some of those examples you had in there. So pick those carefully, make them very memorable. Something for the reader to think about, an idea, maybe a solution, a call to action, and then at the end, tie it all back around together. All right, so this is the Persuasive Essay Writing acronym, and there's also a handout on this in the module. Good luck on your paper.